Hello and welcome to this video about medieval demography. As you may know, demography is the statistical study of human populations. During the Middle Ages, European population numbers often fluctuated. Between the 4th and the 7th century, there were less people in Europe than before. The 8th century represented a turning point. Historians think that from that time onwards, there was an average yearly population growth of 0.25%. By the year 1000, between 50 and 60 million people lived in Europe. In comparison, the total world population at this point is estimated at 300 million. By the start of the 14th century, the European population had increased significantly when there were probably around 70 or 80 million people. Famines, and especially a plague epidemic in the first half of the 14th century, caused a sharp decline. In some places, 1/3 of the population died as a result of this disease. It was not until the 15th century that European population numbers had reached the same level as in 1300. But where do historians get these numbers? And what were the other causes for the fluctuations, besides the plague epidemic? The numbers mentioned above are, of course, mere estimations. Even today, population numbers are not perfectly exact, as population numbers change all the time. But for the last few centuries, researchers have resources at their disposal which allow for pretty specific statistics. Since the end of the 18th century, local authorities all over Europe keep population registers, which keep track of every birth and death. However, such registers or other systematic sources did not exist in the Middle Ages. Hence, historians who research medieval population numbers have to use other sources. Sometimes landowners ordered lists of all their belongings in manorial records, documents listing the lands owned by a noble, as well as the names of the farmers who lived there. The English King William the Conqueror, for example, ordered an inventory of all lands in his kingdom, their owners and their belongings, in order to make sure the crown wouldn't miss any taxes. The result of this was the Domesday Book, published in the year 1086. It contains information about more than 13,000 towns and villages in England and Wales. Another source for population estimates are so-called hearth countings. A hearth or cooking fire was a central place of a household. For every household, taxes had to be paid, and that's why rulers counted hearths. When analyzing these lists and taking into account that about 5 people needed one hearth, historians can make an estimate of the number of people in a certain region. Archaeological findings are yet another important source. Old burial sites and cemeteries enable us to check the average number of children per family and the average age at death. These insights can then be linked to the information from written sources. What were the causes of population increase and decline? The population decline that started in the 4th century was caused by the Dark Ages cold period and the crop failures and diseases that went with it. The wars, migrations, and political chaos that came with the fall of the Western Roman Empire were another reason. But then the medieval warm period made life a tiny bit easier. This and political stability contributed to population growth from the 8th century onwards. Around the year 1000, a variety of aspects led to a snowball effect. Population growth boosted agriculture as more workers were available, and the demand for agricultural products increased. As a consequence, farmers needed to increase their agricultural yield, and technological progress gave them the means to do so. The higher productivity led to agricultural surpluses, which were used to trade. In the 12th century, trade started to be centered in cities. Trade and urbanization also had a positive effect on population growth. Yet population numbers increased quite slowly, especially if we compare the medieval growth to the rapid growth since the late modern period. This slowness was an advantage for medieval farmers, as it gave them the necessary time to adapt to the new needs. What caused the slowness of population growth? Part of the answer is found in the high mortality rates. Childbirth, for example, was quite dangerous. 1 out of 7 women died when giving birth. And even when things went well, when there wasn't any famine or plague, more than 1 in 5 children died before their 5th birthday. Moreover, mortality rates were higher in cities than in the countryside, as life in the former was much unhealthier. The slowness of population growth was also due to human agency. During the late Middle Ages, women usually married when they were between 20 and 25 years old, which was at a later average age than during previous centuries. Many women remained unmarried, and they got less children than married women. Laws on inheritance also played an important role. The inheritance would be divided between all children. Hence, the less children a couple had, the bigger the inheritance part for each child. Also, contraception worthy of the name wasn't available. Among other things, women used cotton tampons soaked in vinegar, which had a spermicidal effect. Needless to say, such methods were hardly reliable. Besides, medieval people had no idea how the menstrual cycle worked. It was not until the 1930s that it was fully understood. At the start of the 14th century, European population growth reached a dangerous turning point. Agricultural production could no longer keep up with population growth. It was also the start of the Little Ice Age. And there were some crop failures. An oversupply of laborers made wages drop, and because there was less food, food prices went up, which caused famine. Add to that the Black Death plague epidemic in the first half of the 14th century, and you know why population numbers dropped. But the decline wouldn't last long. By 1400, the population was growing again. Food scarcity became less of a problem, and wages went up again. Pressure on agriculture lessened as well. Here you get an overview of medieval demography. Don't forget to fill in the Google Forms, and thanks for watching.